During the early 20th century, there was a widening gap between the middle and upper bourgeoisie class and the lower class majority. This separation between social classes and the lack of social mobility fueled the avant-garde movement, which is primarily reflected in art and literature. During the bourgeoisie era, the practice of art was increasingly isolated from the social institutions that had previously constructed it. As noted by Hopkins in his introduction to Surrealism and Dadaism, the avant-garde movement called for artists to move beyond the aesthetic pleasures of art in order to affect and influence people's lives by creating a different experience for the viewer. The role of the artist is therefore reconstructed, putting emphasis on art's instrumental function to express ideas instead of art merely being collections of aesthetically pleasing objects. The early 20th century was a time of chaos and conflict. The outbreak of World War I in 1940 and its widespread repercussions catalyzed the Dadaist movement, a derivative of the avant-garde movement. The Russian Revolution established the Soviet government, providing an alternative ideology of sociology and economics in Europe. Germany was on the verge of a social revolution influenced by the output of the Russian Revolution. Economic shortages and civil uprisings were direct products of World War I, causing dissatisfaction and turmoil throughout the country. The technological innovations of the machine age projected a sense of discontinuity, often resulting in nihilism among many of the working class. In response to this social unrest, the first Dada group was formed in 1916 in Zurich, Switzerland. In neutral Switzerland, artists and writers tired of the rapidly changing political environment and suppression of capitalism created the Cabaret Voltaire, which displayed various artworks and performances of buffoonery and absurdity that became later classified as Dadaist art. The word Dada itself initially held no meaning. One of the key figures of the Zurich Dada movement, German poet Hugo Ball, wrote, Dada, a yes in Romanian, rocking horse and hobby horse in French. For Germans, it is a sign of foolish naivete, joy in procreation, and preoccupation with the baby carriage. Dada expresses the idea of a new beginning, usually from nonsense and absurdity. Through the naming of Dada, artists aspired to establish a renewed social order that rejected the previous overly rational world through the means of art. It blurred the boundary between artist and activist. Apart from the Zurich Dada group, the Dada movement spread to several other areas in Europe, usually coinciding with the region's specific social or political environment. The rising influence of Dadaism in Europe reflected the growing dissatisfaction among these regions in the devastation of the war. There were three major Dada groups outside Switzerland: Berlin Dada, New York Dada, and Paris Dada. I'll be mainly examining the works and characteristics of the Berlin and Paris Dada. The Berlin Dada group. Germany was economically struggling in the aftermath of World War I and suffered from its defeat. As a result of this, Germany's divided labor movement initiated revolutions to claim political power. This led to a period of constant chaos and civil division. The defeat of William II in 1918 solidified the political crisis. Hence, to express disgust to the current cultural position, the leading figure of the Berlin Dada, Hosenbeck, founded the Club Dada in early 1918. Berlin Dada took a much more political approach. This is translated through two ways. First, anarchism in art. Second, the mixture of art and anti-art. In this period of mass strikes and violent uprisings, the Berlin Dadaists reiterated the art of social activism as a part of fine arts. This reiteration of identity projected a general anarchic view and forged a new display of individualism and political dissatisfaction. Their entry primarily included performances, reimagining art as a mechanism for social movement as they paraded the streets, gave speeches, and invented slogans against the established power. This active approach of the artists also suggested their rage with current political situations and tried to construct a new social order. The Berlin Dadaists' mix of art and anti-art showed their attempt to challenge the established definition of art. Anti-art in Berlin opposed mainstream beauty. The Berlin Dada Fair they put up in 1920 had a perplexing structure that made viewers struggle to distinguish anti-art on display from art. This attempt revealed the Berlin Dadaists' awareness of the potency of the advertisement, which is especially prominent during and after the World War I period as mass propaganda was imposed to secure national unity. This was known as war culture. In addition to this, because of the amount of criticism in the works of Berlin Dadaists, few of them were able to escape confiscation, further showing the heightened international activity in the 1920s. Paris Dada. The French Dada was a lot less politically engaged compared to the Berlin Dada. Primarily, it displayed disillusionment and negative nihilism in response to the devastation of World War I. Although it was rarely aggressive in social and political criticism like Berlin Dada, the French Dada still waged war on the outward rhetoric of art. In Paris, two of the leading figures in Dada art, Marcel Duchamp and Picabia, began in 1915-16 to develop a series of artworks that depict hybrids of humans and machines. This showed the cynicism towards the effects the machine age had on human psyche amidst society's constant mechanization. The Paris Dada, too, rejected the initial emphasis on aesthetic pleasure in pre-established art forms. This could be seen as a display of iconoclasm nihilism as they challenged social order with effective disorder shown in their artwork, mixing the boundary between human cognition and the technological influence of the world, feeling that mankind has thrown its lot with mechanization, man as machine. Overall, these regional Dada groups showed a particular tendency to address issues subjective to their political environment, but also stuck to a similar theme of irrationality and social criticism. Although with regional differences, there were some artistic strategies that Dada artists collectively used in their artworks to present the core concepts of Dada art. The law of chance. The law of chance showed randomness in the artist's work. An example would be Jean Arp's collage with squares arranged according to the law of chance, and Duchamp's The Bride stripped bare by her bachelors. These works conform to an irrational set of physical laws that is essentially different from those of reality. Both Arp and Duchamp invoked nature-based interpretations of the artworks by the viewer, as opposed to psychologically based human ones. The Dadaists brought forward an artistic appreciation of an independent realization differing from the individual psyche, depicted their untrust towards human reason and egotism. They distrusted the over-rationality of the world and human cognition. A world war had risen from these values. Collage. The use of collage in Dada artworks created a world of controversy and paradox. An example would be Max Ernst's Santa Conversation collage created in 1921. The technique of collage called a world highly imaginative and essentially inimical to human systems of reason and control. The fragmentation of the artwork through collage created systems of conflicts within the artwork. This is a direct refute to the effects of rationality and reason as mentioned before. By exerting conflicts on the relationship between humans and objects, the Dadaists displayed a sense of absurdity through this tangible bewilderment. Photomontage. This is a technique that is often connected with the innovations of Berlin Dada. This act of cutting up and reconstructing imagery from various daily sources such as magazines and newspapers has the connotation of cutting into the fabric of social reality, as summarized by Hopkins in his Introduction to Surrealism and Dadaism. An example photomontage in Dada art would be artist Hannah Ho's bourgeoisie wedding couple created in 1919. This technique further suggests the dissatisfaction of reality through the breakdown and reconstruction of daily objects. Ready-made. One of the most famous Dada artworks of the ready-made is Duchamp's artwork of a man's urinal, fountain, displayed at the New York Society of Independent Artists exhibition in April of 1917. Despite rising controversies, this attempt through the removal of everyday objects from their environment and placing them in the context of art expanded the range of the definition of art to include anti-art. Duchamp's bicycle wheel created earlier in 1913 freed the object from art's established hierarchy and ironically re-aestheticized them. Both of these artworks that showed ready-made objects collapsed the distinction between art and non-art, exerting skepticism on the definition of art and rejecting the aesthetic pleasure that characterized the art of the bourgeoisie and higher social classes. To summarize, the artistic techniques used by Dada artists reveal the growing skepticism of artists and other people in the face of war. With a sense of mockery and satire in their work, they questioned the legitimacy of their current social order and presented criticism towards these established units of definition and reason, which they believed were the main driving forces behind the World War and post-war chaos. Finally, to conclude, the art of the Dada movement represents a new form of definition in the areas of art by challenging its pre-established standards. Through the reconstruction of the role of artists in society, Dada art translates into an aesthetic of social activism and anarchism founded upon the desire to destroy and renew current social and political orders. It was a direct product of wartime unrest, reflecting people's dissatisfaction and protest attitudes towards international conflict and social turmoil, while at the same time showing widespread discontentment in a polarized social structure that lacks mobility.